Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring the Bart, the upcoming Tier 9 premium French battleship. Now I'll be doing this commentary the same way I've done a few in the past, where I show you both port and various in-game footage to give you an idea of how the ship performs. Before I move on though, I want to highlight something. We just hit 9,000 members on my Discord, and that's absolutely insane. Thank you very much everyone, that is a pretty damn big milestone, and if we actually manage to bump that Discord member number all the way up to 10,000, then I need to host some big giveaway, because that would be a pretty damn impressive threshold. Anyway, let's move on to the ship itself. The ship sits at 69k health, which is honestly quite low for tier 9. The Iowa, for example, has just a flat out 10k more health. The Alsace sits at almost 75k, and honestly, the less said about the likes of Musashi, the better. The Lion probably comes closest to its health pool at 67.9k health, but that one obviously wields the fearsome Royal Navy heel, putting it in a class of its own. Or maybe not entirely, because, well, the Jean Bart heel is actually quite unique. Just like the Massachusetts one. It reloads significantly faster than normal heals. The premium one reloads in a mere 40 seconds. So obviously it has an action time of 28 seconds, which means you can pretty much pop a heal every 1 minute and 8 seconds. If you slot a healing flag, you can bump this heal up to 11.6k health a pop, and if you add in Superintendent, you can slot a total of 5 of these heals for a total of almost 58,000 healing. And thanks to, of course, this rapid reload, you can deploy it in about 6 minutes. So the lower health pool, while it certainly is a weakness, you do have a pretty significant compensating factor here. The armor is, however, like on most French BBs, a significant issue. 32mm all across the board. Now, just like all the other French high tiers, this naturally means that Yamato and Musashi will constantly overmatch you, but that's really not the core issue. More importantly, you are extremely vulnerable to HE spam. The ship does have a turtleback though. The ship does have a turtleback, but you gotta keep in mind, this is not the German turtleback, this is like a Lidl turtleback, this is the French turtleback, which means that it has the same vulnerabilities as all the other French battleships, which means you will probably get Citadel if you give flat broadsides. It doesn't have that same full protection. Now, that doesn't mean you'll always get Citadel though, because the Citadel is a waterline, barely above the waterline Citadel, so it's not quite that vulnerable. But honestly, if you've played the other French battleships, you know exactly how this tankiness is going to behave. It is very, very similar. So obviously, because of this HE weakness, because of this thin armor, it means that building concealment is a very, very viable option. And it turns out concealment build is actually very powerful on the ship, and with a full stealth build you can reach a very respectable 12.3 kilometers of concealment. So this naturally means when you combine this concealment and of course the French affinity for speed, the default speed is I think 30, and then I have a flag on, so it's 31.5, and then if you add a speed boost you can do like 34 knots. So this combined with the concealment means that once again this armor weakness isn't that big of a deal, because you shouldn't have too many issues disengaging and slipping away from battle thanks to this speed and stealth combination. Speaking of maneuverability and slipping away, the turning circle is actually pretty damn good at 850 meters. I think the only one that really beats it is the Lion, of course, once again. But like the Alsace and the Iowa have a good 60-70 meters larger turning circles. So this is quite good. The rudder shift is 16 seconds. Once it's not as special. I mean, you beat the extremely sluggish Iowa and the Musashi by a couple of seconds, but you barely lose out to the Lion. The torque belt, which is 34%, isn't really that special, but it's honestly not that bad either. It's kind of a middle of the pack, and in general, thanks to the maneuverability combination, ideally, of course, you shouldn't be eating too many of the torps. Moving on, we come to the AA part of this ship, and the anti-air on the Jean Bart is actually terrifying, because this ship simply doesn't have any short-range AA. It barely even has something I could class as mid-range AA. The so-called mid-range, aka the shortest range this ship has on the AA, has a 4.5 kilometer range stock. Now obviously long-range auras are a lot more useful than short-range auras because they can spend a longer time shooting the planes as they come in. And the Jean Bart packs a really mean punch on these auras. It has only 4.5 and 5 km auras, and they deal a combined 560 DPS in that range, and that's stock. Now if you add in the AA range modules, AFT, manual AA, the flags, like all the works like I'm doing here when I'm playing against 3 bot Hakurus testing out this AA, it becomes a really scary anti-air monster. I mean, even without this stuff, it already beats the Republic. Like, it's straight up a better AA ship than the Republic. That's the tier 10 French battleship that's considered one of the best AA battleships in the game. So the Jean Bart sets a new bar when it comes to sheer terrifying anti-air. I've also noted that because you only have mid and long range, aka bigger AA mounts, you don't seem to pretty much lose any of them to these bombs. So you very rarely lose them to this. Royal Navy HE spam will still cripple them, of course, because that pretty much cripples everything. Finally, of course, we have the bread and butter of the ship, and something, of course, many people are very interested in, and that is the guns. Now, these guns are identical to the Alsace in almost all aspects. The penetration, the shell velocity, the alpha damage, they are the same 380mm guns. However, there are of course differences. First of all, the Alsace has 12 guns, whereas you only have 8. But the Alsace also has a 32-second reload, whereas the Jean Bart only has a 26-second reload. Add in the 3 million reload module, and you can of course cut this down to 22.9 seconds. Another significant difference is that the Alsace was recently nerfed from 1.7 Sigma to 1.6, whereas the Jean Bart has a 2.0 Sigma, which naturally means that the guns are far more consistent. Although, you do have to remember that far more consistent guns, they are still battleship guns, and there are still only 8 of them. So, even if you get a lot of volleys off, especially at range, the ship will naturally be less effective. Especially the alpha damage can be quite iffy. There are times when the dispersion has trolled me quite heavily in this ship. Usually though, I tend to be able to make up for it with the help of the reload booster, which is of course the big game changer for this ship. And what the reload booster does is it cuts the reload in half. Minus 50% reload time for 30 seconds. Now if you run a full reload build with the reload module of course and AR kicking in, you might get a reload as silly as something like 10 seconds or even below 10 seconds, allowing you to shoot a good 4 volleys off without any issues. And this is of course terrifying. I mean, there's not really any other way of putting it. It is very terrifying because the Jean Bart's ability to punish enemy mistakes becomes incredibly heightened. Like it becomes a level that no other battleship can really match when it comes to punishment. Here we have, for example, Friedrich Grosse. He's reversing out to take some pot shots at my teammates. I see him, I put my crosshair on him, I shoot, and I instantly pop the reload booster. And what this does is it makes what would normally have been like a battleship giving broadside. Sure, it's going to get punished, but the reload booster makes this punishment absolutely extreme compared to what you normally would get. So the actual downsides of only having these 8 guns are greatly mitigated, extremely mitigated by this reload booster, because the burst you can put out on these targets, on these misplays, is terrifying. There's really no other way of looking at it. Like this guy, he started accelerating quite quickly, but that was still 4 volleys I put out on him, and I don't even know how much damage that was, but I can tell you it hurt. I can tell you he's not happy about what he just went through. And this combination of all these things, of course, makes the ship quite scary when it pushes in. You got this guy, like in this case I'm pushing through this enemy DD, and this combination of all these things at once, we got this rapid reloading heal, We got this 2.0 Sigma forward-facing guns, which means you can remain angled the entire time. And, well, I don't have the speed boost active now, but the speed boost of course helps. And then we have the reload booster, that means that this battleship pushing out around the corner is even more terrifying, because, well, if you give broadside to this guy, these are still that same, like French AP has excellent penetration, and this has the very same thing going for it. So this thing pops out around the corner, it's angled, it's hard to kill, it heals fast, it has a huge amount of dakka thanks to this fast reload. But then again, there are of course downsides, as our target here will quite happily demonstrate to us, and that is of course that, well, they are only 380mm guns, which means you can obviously only overmatch 26mm. Well, the relevant armor in the game is probably 25. So ships with 27mm can just tank this guy. They're just immune if they go nose in. Like Hindenburg, Des Moines, they have 27mm nose. Here's a pretty good example of combining multiple things that makes this ship strong. I've reversed back after being focused quite heavily. I'm stealth build, so I know I will get undetected soon, as my concealment is 12.3. I have the speed boost active, which gives me excellent acceleration. And I see that the Montana on the right is pushing quite aggressively. So I reverse, use my concealment to get undetected, use my speed boost to build up some speed before I start turning hard right to put myself out of the crossfire I would normally be in, and of course to close the distance with this Montana even further. So this Montana that thought he was in a fairly safe position, thanks to a bit of maneuvering, a bit of repositioning, and of course the reload booster. The punishment I can put out on this guy, of course, tight turning circle helps a fair bit here when it comes to making maneuvers like this, but the sheer punishment that I can pump out on this guy when I suddenly pop out a stealth with this reload booster is, once again, terrifying. And like the applications for this module, for this booster, are endless. You see someone popping up broadside, you pop it to cut your reload in half because it activates instantly. So if you got 20 seconds remaining on your reload, someone starts turning broadside, you can pop the reload booster and it cuts your reload in half. So it has so much utility, and of course you also got fairly good HE on this ship, so you can switch to HE and burn ships very quickly. You can burst them down. You see a battleship hit a torpedo, there's nothing stopping you from switching to HE and using the reload booster to basically become a pocket cruiser and just start multiple fires on him. It has a lot of stuff going on for it, and that's kind of why I feel like it's a bit much. Right now, this ship is a bit much. It's got great concealment, great speed, in general, just really good maneuverability. Thanks to the fast reloading heal, it's very survivable. The gunpowder is terrifying thanks to the reload booster, and just in general, the guns are just very, very solid. So, it's a bit too much at once. And of course, the AA, as I mentioned, is probably the best battleship AA in the entire game. So, it's got a bit too many things going on at once. It's a bit too much at once. I realize tier 9 is the power creep tier with Kronstadts and Missouris and Musashis and all of this, but come on, man, this is a bit much. This is just a bit much wargaming. I think this thing needs to be toned down a bit. It's really pushing the boundaries on pretty much all the extremes at this point. Anyway, that was my initial impressions of Bart. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys later.